All right, guys, let's go ahead and dive into probably one of the most important lessons, which is going to be macronutrients. What I want to do here is I want to go ahead and break down each macronutrient, give you guys a fundamental understanding of what role they play within the body, and really answer a lot of the questions that you guys might have, because there is a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of negativity being placed on certain macronutrients that we should keep them off our nutrition, and you don't have to. And I'm going to break down exactly why. So at the end of the day, I'm going to say this because it's so important right off the bat. It is the dosage, not the actual thing itself. So when we look at carbs, carbs aren't making you fat. Protein isn't going to make you fat. Fat isn't going to make you fat unless you are over consuming on calories. If you're over consuming on calories, it doesn't matter which macronutrient comes in. If it is above your calories, you're going to start storing body fat. Again, it's the dosage. If you drink too much water, guess what? Probably might drown. So it's not the thing itself, and I wanted to clear that right off the bat. So let's go ahead and dive into this. I broke this down into 5 parts for you guys. So the number one thing we're going to dive into is going to be protein. Protein is king, and we're going to break down why. Second, we're going to dive into carbohydrates. Are they truly the reason why you can't lose weight? This was going to be a good one for you guys. Then we have fats, the second most essential macronutrient, and we're going to break down why. We have fiber, which isn't technically considered a macronutrient, but it's something that you do want to be consciously aware of, because fiber will play an important role within the body, and we're going to break that down as well. The last thing I do want to dive into is going to be alcohol. Alcohol is, part of our, life. We're going to consume alcohol. So I want to break down how the body breaks it down, how it utilizes, pros, cons, all that stuff about alcohol. So let's go ahead and get into it, right? So protein is king. We mentioned this, right? Why is protein king? So protein is essential when it comes down to our body. And the reason why it's essential, because if we want to build lean tissue, if we want to have that toned physique or that muscular physique, we're going to need to have muscle mass on our frame. And without protein, we cannot build lean tissue. Protein gets broken down or metabolized, and it'll break down into amino acids, and then the body will shuttle these around to wherever it needs to go to repair and rebuild more muscle fibers. So without protein, we're not going to get jacked. I want you guys to understand that. If you want to get jacked, if you want to look good, you need to pay pretty close attention to your protein. When it comes down to how much you should be intaking a day, what we want to shoot for here is going to be 0.8 to 1.2 grams on average per lean tissue or ideal weight. And this is important, right? Lean tissue. If someone is weighing 170 pounds of lean tissue and they want to do, 1 gram per pound, beautiful. That is 170 if they're weighing 170, right? So with this, right, the reason why we don't want to do it per pound and we're doing per lean tissue is because if you weigh 300 pounds, if you weigh 350 pounds or 400 pounds, you are not going to be consuming 400 grams of protein. That is going to keep you very full. It's going to make it really hard to get your calories in for the day. And at the end of the day, if you have carbohydrates and fats in there, you don't need it. Carbohydrates are protein sparing. You just need an adequate amount, whatever your intake is going to be, and then you're golden, right? As far as, pushing it a little bit higher. So this is something I've done with clients, and this is something that I will only do during a fat loss phase. I will actually push their protein, or can push their protein up to 1.5 grams. The reason why I do this is because protein is very satiating. What I mean by this is going to keep you full for longer periods of time, because it takes longer to break down. Not only that, your body is also going to burn more calories just trying to break it down. Normally, you will burn around like 20 to 30% of the calories from protein coming in, trying to break that protein down and being able to utilize it. So with that being said, right, does having, a higher protein intake affect the kidneys? This is something that, it's very commonly asked. And the thing here is, if you have healthy kidneys, if you have no issues with your kidneys, pushing your protein up to 1.5 grams isn't going to do anything. Right? Some people might have a little bit harder time digesting protein. If they do, then you probably don't want to push that high. But if you're someone that has no issue digesting protein, cool, you can push it that high, right? Another important thing to know about protein is for 1 gram of protein, you are going to be getting 4 calories. okay? Big thing here, right? If you're vegan, so although we do not coach vegans, I do like to provide the education just in case anybody that is watching this is vegan. Here's what you have to understand. When you are a vegan and you're trying to, hit your protein intake, you almost have to look at it like a puzzle, right? And the reason why you have to look at it like a puzzle is because we have complete proteins and then we have incomplete proteins. Most plant proteins are going to be incomplete, meaning they don't have the full array of the amino acids, right? So in order to fix this, what we have to do is we have to pair food together. One is going to have one index of the amino acids, another is going to have the ones that are missing from the first one. So for example, beans and rice, these complement one another. One of them is going to have the things that are missing from the other one. And now you are actually getting a complete protein. You're going to be able to utilize that. If you do not, do this, then you're getting a lot of incomplete proteins, which your body isn't going to be able to utilize to repair and rebuild muscle. So you have to keep that in consideration. For vegans, I do highly recommend having a supplement, any kind of protein powder that you enjoy, that you like, that is high quality. You want to make sure you're including it in there. So remember, guys, plant protein versus meat protein, they're different, right? Meat protein is going to come with the full rate of amino acids. When we look at plant protein, it's not going to have that. So be very, very careful about this. But again, protein is the most essential. We cannot build amino acids, or we cannot build 9 of the essential amino acids that we need in order to rebuild and repair tissue. So we need to be getting that from an outside source. Next, we're going to be diving into is carbohydrates. Big thing with carbohydrates. Normally, carbohydrates get looked at in a very negative manner, and the reason why they get looked at in a very negative manner is because of insulin, right? People will always blame insulin. Insulin is the reason why I cannot lose weight. If you're insulin sensitive, then you definitely have to dive into that. It's going to be a little bit harder for you to be able to lose that weight. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. It doesn't mean that carbohydrates are the reason why you can't lose the weight. Ultimately, it comes down to controlling the carbohydrates and making sure that we are still staying in a calorie deficit. But the big thing with insulin, before I just kind of ramble on with other stuff, right? So insulin isn't the reason why you can't lose weight. And the reason why insulin isn't that reason is because insulin will act like a key to the cell. So our body will transport glucose or amino acids like we talked about previously. But in order to do that, insulin needs to open up that cell. Then the body can transport that glucose or those amino acids to wherever they need to go. Most people will say insulin is just storing body fat. Insulin cannot do any of that unless you're in a surplus, right? So if you aren't over consuming on your calories and you're hitting your maintenance, there's nothing to store. So insulin isn't going to do anything. You're not going to be gaining more weight. You're not going to be gaining any body fat because you don't have anything to store. Plain and simple, right? Big thing with carbohydrates, people remove them very quickly from their diet. But what you have to remember is carbohydrates are what's going to have more fibrous sources, right? We're looking at avocado, we're looking at oats, we're looking at blueberries, strawberries. These are all carb sources, and these are all sources that are really good for fiber, which again plays a very positive role. So if you're removing carbohydrates, you're probably going to remove fiber, which isn't going to end very well for you. Carbohydrates are also the body's preferred energy source. So what I mean by this is they get broken down very easily and we can utilize them immediately, right? If they don't get used immediately, what ends up happening is your body's going to convert that to glucose. Then that will be stored into the liver as well as the muscles, and this can get broken down later back into glucose to utilize as energy. Most times when people start consuming a little bit more carbohydrates, they'll see the scale go upwards and immediately just think, hey, you know what? These are causing me to get fat. There's a very big difference between weight gain and fat gain. So weight gain is measuring everything. Fat gain is just fat gain, right? If your weight spikes pretty dramatically in the beginning, if you have been eating a lot of carbohydrates, then you spike your carbohydrates significantly. The reason why that is happening is because when your body stores, the glycogen in the muscle and the liver, what it's also going to do it's also going to retain water. Every 1 gram of glycogen is going to hold 4 grams of water. So, it makes sense why the weight is going up. We're holding on to a little bit more water. And again, it does not mean it is fat. You're holding on to a little bit more water weight, which is a big thing that I want you guys to remember whenever you are including more carbohydrates into your diet. The weight spikes, it's most likely going to be water, okay? Just like protein, 1 gram of carb is going to give you 4 calories. The one we want to dive into next is going to be fats. So fats are going to be essential as well. Carbohydrates are not essential. So you can actually go your whole life without consuming carbohydrates. Is it ideal? No, because carbohydrates taste good, right? And your body's able to utilize them. Big thing with carbohydrates as well, before I go on to fats, when we look at carbohydrates, a really good thing here that a lot of people miss is carbohydrates. Like I said, they're awesome for energy, but the second thing they're going to really help out with is going to be your recovery. After your workout, what ends up happening is your cortisol levels are elevated because we obviously need to break stuff down within the body to gain that energy to be able to perform in the gym. After the workout, like I mentioned, cortisol is high. We want to bring that cortisol down so we can go into pretty much like rest and digest recovery process. What ends up happening here, we're consuming carbohydrates post-workout. What that's going to do, it's going to spike insulin, and it's going to help bring your cortisol levels down, because insulin and cortisol have an inverse effect. So if you're someone that pretty highly stressed out, carbohydrates can probably help bring some of that cortisol levels down. So really, really awesome. You can utilize them really well, and again, it just tastes freaking amazing. Now, diving into fats, right? Fats. The one thing here with fats, right? Fats are essential, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, and the reason why they're essential is because there is vitamins that our body cannot metabolize without fats. So we're not getting fats into our nutrition. We're not going to be able to metabolize these vitamins and minerals and be able to actually use them within the body. They're also really important for hormonal regulation. If you're not consuming fats, your hormone regulation can probably start plummeting, and it's something that we want to be very worried about, especially for females, right? The one thing to also take into consideration with fats is if you are in a surplus, we do want to keep fats managed. And the reason why we want to keep fats managed is because fats do not really have to get converted to anything to be stored, because it's already a fatty acid. So our body can store that pretty much immediately, versus carbs and protein. We have to break those down. Fats don't work that way, right? So fats are something we want to pay attention to, just because their calories are also significantly higher. If we're consuming 1 gram of protein or carb, that's going to be 4 calories. If we're consuming 1 gram of fat, that's 9, a little bit over double. So we do want to pay attention to that, right? Big thing with fats and the benefits of fats, right? So fats are the powerhouse of the body's powerhouse of energy. Like I mentioned, 9 calories per gram. They play a part in the membrane function and structure, which is super important. Regulate hormones, like I mentioned earlier. Metabolize soluble vitamins such as A, D, E, and K. And then we're also going to get omega-3. So omega-3s and omega-6s. So omega-6s play a role in pro-inflammatory, blood clotting, and increase increase pain, which is needed in training and recovery and recovering from training. Omega-3s are anti-inflammation. They help dilate blood vessels, decrease pain, and reduce systemic inflammation. So with this, right, fats are essential. We don't want to remove them, but we do want to be very careful with them, because they can push us over our calories pretty quickly. Now, fiber. So with fiber, there's a few benefits here, and this is something that very, very often gets overlooked. Most people, when they start doing macros, they're like, if it fits the macros, like, cool, we're good to go. It doesn't really work that way. There's still guidelines that we want to follow in order to make sure that we are functioning, optimally, right? And fiber is going to be one of those. So with fiber, we have 2 types of fiber. We have soluble fiber, and then we have insoluble fiber. So soluble fiber, what ends up happening here is whenever it touches water, it'll dissolve and it'll turn into like a gel-like substance, right? Which, is very often associated with heart health, which is a positive, right? Then we have insoluble fiber, which is exactly as it sounds. It's insoluble. So we can't break this down. We don't have the enzymes for it. It's just going to stay in our stomach, and it's going to help us remove waste, right? As far as intake, one of the best recommendations I could give here is shooting for about like 14 grams per 1,000 calories. So as calories come up, you're probably going to need a little bit more fiber, right? But most females are going to be consuming around, about 2,000 calories, which is going to put them at about 22 to 28 grams, which is a pretty solid intake. For males, we're going to be around like 32 to 38 grams because, males, more often are a little bit heavier, have a little bit more muscle mass. They're going to be eating more food, right? As far as the benefits from it, provides satiety. So insoluble fiber, again, just sits in the gut, helps remove, waste. Then we have soluble fibers. So soluble fiber is actually really, really solid. And the reason why soluble fiber is amazing is because if you're someone that has elevated cholesterol, what it could do here is that soluble fiber is going to attach the cholesterol coming in from the food, and it's going to help excrete that, right? So when we already have high cholesterol in the body, naturally, we don't want to have an excess amount of cholesterol coming in from food, and this right here is going to help regulate that, right? It also helps with lowering LDL and a few other biomarkers which are closely related to heart disease. We want to also just ensure that, we're getting tons of fruit and veggies, and if we're paying attention to fiber, guess what? We're going to be eating a lot of fruits and veggies. So fiber is super, super essential. We don't want to avoid it. We do want to make sure we're paying attention to it as we're going through this stuff because it does play a massive role in gut health, and gut health drives everything. If you aren't digesting and metabolizing your food efficiently, you're probably going to have a lot of issues really just, getting through it all, right? Lastly, we have alcohol. So alcohol is something I did want to dive into just because, again, we want to really understand what's going on with this. So a big thing with alcohol is, it's good. It's good for the soul, right? Sometimes you want to go out with friends, you want to go out with family, you want to have a beer, you want to have a few shots. That's totally okay. But the biggest thing to remember with alcohol is your body can't even really utilize it, right? So your body will see this as a toxin, and it's going to move very quickly to remove it from the system. The one thing we want to do with alcohol is we want to avoid it post-workout. So if you're someone that just worked out, make sure that you have a meal before you actually go out to eat and wait a few hours. The reason why we want to do that is because post-workout, that meal is going to help you recover. If we consume alcohol afterwards, what ends up happening is that is going to go to the front line. So your body is going to focus on metabolizing and getting rid of alcohol before it starts breaking down carbs and fats to help with the recovery. So that's one big thing that I want you guys to take away from this. As far as how many calories come in per gram of alcohol, we are looking at 7 calories. A lot of people don't realize this, but whenever you're taking a shot, that's about like 80 to 100 calories. The biggest issue with alcohol, to be honest with you guys, isn't alcohol itself. It comes down to the decisions made when consuming alcohol. Most people will get blasted, and then next thing you know, they are just downing some fries, a burrito, pizza, or something heavy like a burger, right? And this is where those issues come in. Now we are over consuming on calories because our cognitive is a little bit altered, right? We're not making the best decisions. We're just saying, fuck it, I'm going to do whatever I want, whatever feels good in the moment. And most times, that isn't really the best for us, right? So with this, what we want to do here is we want to make sure that we're having it away from our workouts, right? As again, it limits recovery process. A big thing here too, whenever you're drinking, you have to understand that it isn't just a one night thing, right? It isn't just, hey, I'm going to drink Friday night and then I'm good. If you're drinking Friday night and you're overdoing it, it's most likely going to lead into Saturday, and then it's most likely going to lead into Sunday. So now we're taking an impact of 2 to 3 days versus it just being one day, right? It lowers hormones, which is a big one there, lowers awareness, and then cognitive function. So with that being said, guys, a big thing with everything said here, and like I said in the beginning, it's not the macronutrient itself, it is the dosage. If you're eating too many carbohydrates, then guess what? You're going to gain body fat. If you're eating too much fats or protein, you're also going to gain too much body fat. So you want to pay attention to this stuff, and each one plays a role. Protein's going to help you repair, rebuild muscle. Carbohydrates, they're going to help you for energy to perform in the gym as well as recovery afterwards. Fats are going to help with hormone regulation as well as metabolizing fat-soluble vitamins. Fiber is going to help with gut health and as well as cardiovascular health. So we want to keep that in here. Alcohol, you can have it here and there if it allows you to stay consistent for the rest of the week, but you also don't want to overdo it. Hope this gives you everything you need from this, and if you have any more questions about any of this, feel free to reach out, let me know.